You are being watched right now, not by cameras, not by algorithms, by people. Every room you enter, every word you speak in public, every micro-expression you allow to slip through, it is being cataloged, processed, and stored. Most people have no idea this is happening. They walk through social environments like tourists in a foreign city, wide-eyed, exposed, assuming the world around them is as innocent as they feel. They are wrong. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something in the 15th century that most people still refuse to accept today. Public life is not social life. It is warfare conducted through perception. The battlefield is not made of steel and fire. It is made of impressions, silences, and carefully constructed images. And the soldiers who win are not the loudest, the most charming, or the most liked. They are the most controlled. If you have ever felt respected in one room and dismissed in another without understanding why, this is the answer. If you have ever watched someone less intelligent, less hardworking, and less talented rise to a position you deserved, this is the mechanism. And if you have ever lost something you wanted, a deal, a relationship, the respect of someone who mattered, and couldn't trace exactly where it went wrong, what you are about to hear will explain everything. Machiavelli wrote The Prince not as a guide to tyrants. He wrote it as a mirror, a ruthless, unforgiving mirror held up to the face of reality. He looked at power not as it should be, but as it is. And what he saw was this. In every human interaction, people are constantly evaluating you, judging whether you represent strength or vulnerability, whether you are someone to be aligned with or consumed. This evaluation happens beneath words, beneath smiles, beneath handshakes. It is primal and it is constant. Today, we are going to look at 9 behaviors that destroy your power in public without you realizing it. 9 things Machiavelli would tell you with cold clarity to stop doing immediately, not because they are immoral, but because they are strategic suicide. Most people will hear this and resist. They will say this is manipulation, that authenticity matters, that being vulnerable is strength. That is the comfortable lie. The truth is sharper. You can be authentic and private. In public, you are always performing. The only question is whether you are performing deliberately or unconsciously. The unconscious performer loses every time. Think about the last time you felt deeply frustrated by someone. Maybe they consistently underestimate you. Maybe they take your ideas without credit. Maybe they treat you with a casual indifference that quietly enrages you. Now ask yourself honestly, have you ever let them see that frustration? Have you ever let your face show it, your voice carry it, your body language broadcast it? If the answer is yes, you handed them the map to your interior, and whoever holds the map controls the territory. The first thing you must never do in public is reveal what moves you emotionally. Machiavelli was obsessive on this point. He understood that visible emotion is not weakness in the sentimental sense. It is weakness in the strategic sense. It tells others exactly where to apply pressure. It tells them what you want, what you fear, what you value. And once they know that, they no longer need to earn your cooperation. They can simply threaten or flatter the right nerve. This is not about becoming emotionless. The Stoics taught this too. Marcus Aurelius spent decades in one of the most politically dangerous environments in human history, and he survived because he mastered the discipline of the interior life. Emotion felt privately is human. Emotion displayed publicly is leverage handed to your enemies. Carl Jung called the public face the persona, the mask through which we interact with society. Most people confuse the mask with the face. They think that being genuine means letting every internal experience show. But the mask is not a lie. It is a filter. The man who controls his mask controls how the world moves toward him. The next time something angers you in a meeting, in a negotiation, in a conversation with someone who matters, and it will, let the anger pass through you internally. Breathe it. Acknowledge it to yourself. Then, present a measured calm, not fake warmth, not rehearsed indifference. Calm authority, the kind of stillness that makes others wonder what you know that they don't. People fear what they cannot read, and they respect what they cannot disturb. Here is something society will never tell you directly, but Machiavelli would. The world does not reward suffering. It does not reward loyalty that wasn't asked for. It does not reward sacrifice performed in silence, and it absolutely does not reward public complaint. The second thing you must never do in public is complain. Not about your circumstances, not about difficult people, not about the system, the unfairness, the obstacles you're facing. Never, not once. This is the behavior that kills more potential than any other, and it is everywhere. You see it in the person who talks endlessly about how hard they have it. You see it in the professional who explains all the reasons their project is behind schedule. You see it in the leader who lets their team hear how exhausted, overwhelmed, or underappreciated they are. Machiavelli was ruthless about this. The prince who complains signals two things simultaneously: that he is suffering and that he cannot stop it. In one breath, he announces his vulnerability and his impotence. The prince who never complains announces something very different. He announces that whatever is happening around him, he is handling it. He is above it. He is the one who controls outcomes, not the one who endures them. Schopenhauer observed that most people talk about their problems, not to solve them, but to feel the temporary warmth of sympathy. It's a drug, a hit of validation that costs enormously and produces nothing. Every time you complain publicly, you are making a transaction. You receive a brief moment of social soothing, and in exchange, you sacrifice a portion of your perceived power. The people who respect you most are often those who have no idea what you are carrying. That is not accidental. It is architecture. The third thing you must never do is criticize people in public, especially those who are not present to defend themselves. This one is subtle. It feels righteous in the moment. Someone betrayed you. Someone did something wrong. Someone deserves to be called out. And so you say it in front of others, expecting to gain their agreement, their validation, maybe their alliance. What you actually gain is their suspicion. Machiavelli noted that the man who attacks the absent is always creating a quiet fear in those present. What does he say about me when I leave the room? Public criticism of others does not make you look stronger. It makes you look unstable. Someone who cannot manage their private conflicts privately. It signals emotional leakage, and it positions you as the aggressor, not the victim, regardless of who was actually wronged. Silence is not forgiveness, it is strategy. What you say in public should always serve your architecture. Praise in public when it benefits you. Stay silent about enemies in public. Handle grievances behind closed doors where the terms are yours to set. Take a moment and ask yourself honestly, how many times have you spoken against someone in a room and later realized it said more about you than about them? Write that question in the comments, because the recognition of this pattern is the first cut of the surgeon's knife. There is a moment that happens to almost everyone, a moment of high performance, a breakthrough, a result that finally visibly proves your worth. And the instinct that arrives is almost irresistible. You want to explain how you did it. You want people to understand the process, the difficulty, the intelligence behind the outcome. Resist it completely. The fourth thing you must never do in public is over-explain yourself. And this connects to something Machiavelli understood deeply. Mystery generates power. The prince who explains his every decision invites debate. The prince who acts decisively and says little invites awe. Sociologist Irving Goffman spent his career studying what he called the performance of self in everyday life. He found that human beings are in constant theater, managing impressions, constructing narratives, controlling what others are allowed to see. The most powerful performers in this theater are not the loudest or the most expressive. They are the ones who control what is withheld. When you over-explain, you are trying to manage someone else's perception by flooding them with information. But perception does not work that way. People do not form their impression of you from your explanations. They form it from the gap between your confidence and your need for their approval. The less you need to explain, the more authority you project. Never defend a decision to someone who didn't ask for a defense. Never justify a choice to someone who had no right to question it. When challenged, learn the power of the short answer. Let the silence after it do the heavy work. The fifth thing you must never do is display financial desperation, not the fact of it, and not even the energy of it. Machiavelli was merciless on this point. Need is a scent. People smell it even when it is invisible. The man who needs the deal communicates that need through the pace of his speech, his eagerness to agree, his reluctance to walk away. And the moment the other side senses need, the negotiation is over, not in their favor, in their possession. This is not about pretending you don't have financial pressures. This is about understanding that your desperation is never relevant information in a public or professional context. You do not share it. You do not reference it. You do not let it shape your posture or your pace. Whatever is happening in your financial life, in public, you are a person operating from choice, not from emergency. You are still here. That tells me something about the way your mind is wired. Most people would have stopped watching 10 minutes ago, the moment this started requiring something uncomfortable from them. The fact that you are still present, still listening, means you already understand at some level that the truth being built here is worth the discomfort it costs to hear. What comes next is where this gets transformative. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that a ruler must be both a fox and a lion, cunning enough to recognize traps and strong enough to frighten wolves. Most people are neither. They are donkeys, predictable, loyal to whoever holds the carrot, and entirely transparent in their motivations. The sixth thing you must never do in public is telegraph your next move. This applies to ambition, strategy, and desire. When you tell people what you want before you have it, the promotion you are going after, the deal you are trying to close, the relationship you are pursuing, you invite interference. Not necessarily malicious interference, though that exists. More often, it is the unconscious interference of people who become suddenly competitive the moment they understand your direction. People who were neutral become obstacles. People who were friendly become rivals. And all because you narrated your own chess game out loud. Robert Greene, whose work extends Machiavelli's framework into the modern world, calls this law concealing your intentions. The most effective people in any domain share results, not plans. They announce arrivals, not departures. They let their outcomes speak first, and their process remain private. The seventh thing you must never do in public is seek validation openly. This is the one that will cost many of you the most, because the hunger for validation is one of the deepest and most normalized compulsions in modern culture. You are trained for it from childhood. You are rewarded with attention, with approval, with likes and shares and affirmations, and so you bring this hunger into adult life and into professional environments, where it signals exactly the opposite of what you intend. When you ask, "How did I do?" in a room where the answer isn't yours to demand, you signal insecurity. When you seek reassurance before making a decision, you signal that your judgment cannot be trusted. When you need the room to applaud before you believe in your own contribution, you signal that your confidence is borrowed, not owned. Machiavelli admired what he called virtù, not virtue in the moral sense, but capability, presence, the ability to impose your will on circumstances. Virtù cannot coexist with open need for external validation. A man who needs your approval cannot simultaneously project authority. These two things are incompatible at the neurological level, and every person in the room feels the contradiction, even if they cannot name it. The 8th thing you must never do in public is reveal your alliances and your enemies prematurely. In any social environment, a company, a community, a social network, there are competing interests. People are aligned and opposed in ways that are often invisible on the surface. The politically naive person walks into this landscape and immediately begins declaring, "I'm close with so-and-so. I don't trust this person. I think what they are doing is wrong." What they have just done is handed a detailed map of their loyalties and vulnerabilities to everyone in earshot. Machiavelli warned repeatedly about the dangers of partial alliance, choosing sides publicly before you understand the full geometry of power in a space. The man who announces his enemies gives them time to prepare. The man who announces his allies gives his enemies a target. Say nothing about who you trust until trust has already been tested in private. Say nothing about who you oppose until the moment of opposition actually serves you. Keep the map of your interior politics invisible. Let others reveal their alliances while you observe. Information gathered in silence is always more valuable than information given freely. We have arrived at the 9th behavior, and I want you to understand that this is not the most spectacular of the 9. It will not feel like the sharpest revelation, but it is the one that, once you understand it, will change everything about how you move through the world. The 9th thing you must never do in public is treat public space as private space. This sounds obvious until you watch how people actually behave. They have private arguments in restaurants. They process personal crises in offices. They discuss their ambitions, their fears, their conflicts, their private lives in environments where the walls are not walls, they are audiences. Machiavelli understood that the prince who cannot distinguish between his private court and his public court has already lost. There is information that belongs to the inside of your life, your doubts, your strategies, your vulnerabilities, your unprocessed emotions, and there is information that belongs to the outside. The man who lets the inside leak into the outside is not being authentic, he is being careless. And carelessness in public spaces is the most expensive luxury you can indulge. Here is the paradox that ties all 9 of these laws together, the thing that Machiavelli understood and most people spend their entire lives failing to grasp. Controlling your public self is not about hiding who you are, it is about protecting who you are becoming. The version of you that is still being built, still uncertain, still learning, still carrying the wounds of past failures and the rawness of present ambitions, that version needs privacy to develop. When you expose it prematurely, when you bring the unfinished self into public spaces that demand completion, you subject your growth to the judgment of people who have no investment in your outcome. And judgment, when it arrives before you are ready, does not accelerate development, it arrests it. Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole, as something that requires a protected interior, not a closed interior, but a protected one. You develop your depths privately. You present your strength publicly. The public face is not a lie about the private truth. It is a boundary that keeps the private truth safe enough to grow. Machiavelli never asked his princes to become emotionless machines. He asked them to become architects. An architect does not pour the foundation in public and invite spectators to watch it crack. He builds in privacy. He reveals the finished structure. He lets the completed thing speak for what he is. You are the structure, and you are still being built. The most powerful realization you can leave with today is not a technique or a tactic. It is a shift in how you understand the relationship between your interior and the world. Most people believe that authenticity means transparency, that being real means being open, available, visible. Machiavelli would say this is the most expensive confusion in modern social life. Authenticity is not visibility. Authenticity is alignment between who you are inside and what you choose to build in the world. You can be deeply, profoundly authentic and deeply, profoundly private. These are not opposites, They are partners. The man who controls what he reveals in public does not become less himself. He becomes more himself, because he is no longer allowing the reactions, the judgments, and the projections of others to interrupt the process of his own becoming. Machiavelli said that fortune is a river. It can be managed with dams and channels, but only by the man who built the infrastructure before the flood arrived. Your public behavior is that infrastructure. Build it deliberately. Build it now, because the flood is already moving. Now I want to ask you something directly. Of the 9 behaviors we examined today, which one hit closest to home? Which one did you recognize in yourself most immediately? Write it in the comments, not because I need the engagement, but because naming the pattern is the first act of dismantling it. The people who comment are the ones who are actually doing the work. If this opens something in you, subscribe, not for the algorithm, because what we build here goes deeper than most channels are willing to go. And the next video will take you further.